Herring and hair garbage. Ah, herring shouldn't smell fine from garbage, and garbage shouldn't smell fine from herring.
Tonight, we're going to talk about Charlie Chaplin's first talkie, The Great Dictator. In the late 1930s, Charlie Chaplin was considered the only Hollywood filmmaker to continue to make silent films. Talkies were officially inaugurated in 1927 with The Jazz Singer, and from there, almost every Hollywood director and star got into the sound game or faded away like a Norma Desmond. Chaplin felt extremely conflicted about the new technology. He claimed to be extremely obsessed with a depressing fear of seeming old-fashioned, and yet he felt like silent films were more artistic. He also feared that his little tramp character wouldn't translate into dialogue. Chaplin had an extraordinary amount of control over his own projects. From a very young age, he was obsessed with performing and acting, appearing on the stage and traveling on tours around the vaudeville circuit, first in his homeland of England and then North America. In 1914, he was picked up off his second American tour and asked if he wanted to act in films. An early medium, Chaplin was scouted by the New York Motion Picture Company, which filmed out of Keystone Studios. His first film, Making a Living, was not a film that Charlie Chaplin liked. He had a slow start appearing in Keystone shorts, and during this lull, Chaplin began teaching himself about filmmaking. This meant that he had a ton of ideas that came pouring out of him, to the chagrin of many of the earliest directors that he worked with. He worked with Mabel Normand on many of her shorts, and in Mabel's Strange Predicament, Chaplin debuted the little tramp character he'd soon make famous. Mabel Normand has been long forgotten, but has been credited as Charlie Chaplin's mentor, teaching him the ropes of filmmaking. And she knew a thing or two about ropes. At 22 years old, she had been in 100 films, and was the first damsel in distress ever tied to train tracks in a movie. However, Mabel and Charlie clashed so badly on Mabel at the Wheel that Mack Sennett of Keystone almost fired him, but instead Chaplin managed to convince Sennett to let him try directing. Caught in the Rain was Chaplin's directorial debut, and it became incredibly popular, allowing Charlie to start directing most of his work from there. Charlie began pumping out a film a week for the rest of the year. He wasn't done working with Mabel Normand either, co-writing with her and even directing Mabel's Married Life. At the end of 1914, Mack Sennett directed Keystone's only feature-length comedy starring Charlie Chaplin and Mabel Normand, as well as the Keystone Cops and Marie Dressler, Tilly's Punctured Romance. When this feature was released and Charlie's year-long contract was over, he asked for $1,000 a week. Sennett refused and said that was way too much. However, S&A Film Manufacturing Company was willing to pay him $12.50 a week. For a comparison, after 100 films, Mabel Normand still made $150 a week. At S&A, Chaplin slowed down the pace, putting more work into his projects, and in 1915, his year with S&A, he made 14 films. He also began recruiting new collaborators: Edna Purvis, his new leading lady, Leo White, who would later appear in The Great Dictator and most of Charlie's films from here, Ben Turpin, Bud Jameson, Patty McGuire, and Fred Goodwins. This is where Chaplin's fame shot up, and he began being viewed as a cultural icon. They called it Chaplinitis. In 1916, Chaplin moved studios again to Mutual for a $670,000 contract, a huge sum that at that time shocked newspaper readers around the country. They also started a $1.5 million Charlie Chaplin producing company and built a studio. It was said that next to the war, Charlie Chaplin is the most expensive item in contemporary history. The contract gave him complete creative freedom to make 12 two-reel comedies. In 1917, with his output decreasing, Charlie ended his Mutual contract and signed for 8 films for First National Exhibitors Circuit for $1 million, starting with the film A Dog's Life, adding depth to the little tramp character. The frustration and lack of concern for quality building at these studios led Charlie Chaplin to join D.W. Griffith, Mary Pickford, and Douglas Fairbanks and start a United Artists, a distribution company they had complete control over. Having control over at United Artists meant that Chaplin could move to directing silent features. He could also take far longer to work on each film. The Gold Rush, inspired by the story of the Donner Party, came out in 1925. City Lights, which was about the tramp falling in love with a blind flower girl. During the 3 years Chaplin spent making City Lights, 1927 and 1930, The Jazz Singer came out, and most filmmakers began moving away from silent films. But the new recording technology did give Chaplin the ability to write and record a score for the film. After that, Chaplin began doing soul searching, going to Western Europe in 1931, then traveling suddenly to Japan he was almost a target of an ultra-nationalist assassination that killed the Prime Minister on May 15th. The May 15th incident saw the League of Blood ultra-nationalist group plot to assassinate Charlie Chaplin to provoke a war with the United States. But they got the date wrong, as Chaplin was delayed, and they assassinated the Prime Minister instead. In 1932, he met Paulette Goddard, a 21-year-old actress who would become his wife and leading lady. Traveling around in the Great Depression gave Chaplin something he wanted to say and boosted his creativity again. In 1936, Chaplin released Modern Times, a silent comedy described by him as a satire on certain phases of our industrial life. Chaplin's travels, and let's be honest, the development of new technology that threatened to render him obsolete, made him worry in the wake of the Depression about how machines were both incredibly dangerous and may start leading to more unemployment, like during the Depression. This anxiety was tackled through film and physical comedy. The film is full of references to automation and how individual workers struggle to adapt to machines. The political implications, absent from Chaplin's previous films, were taken notice of by critics and audiences, even as Chaplin tried to downplay that part of it. The film contains a sequence with a little tramp being caught in a giant machine, a communist strike at a factory, a sequence with narcotics. Everywhere the little tramp works taxes his body. Apart from the political implications, in retrospect, it's also considered a farewell to the little tramp character. This was his last silent film. After Modern Times, Chaplin and Goddard left for a trip to Asia where they traveled around Vietnam and then Hong Kong. During this time, tensions were rising and another world war got closer and closer. That brings us to Charlie Chaplin's first talkie, The Great Dictator. Charlie Chaplin had long noticed eerie parallels between himself and one Führer, Adolf Hitler. They both had the same mustache. They were born 4 days apart in April 1889. They both grew up poor and became world famous. In 1923, as Hitler was involved in the failed beer hall putsch, Chaplin was releasing his first feature-length film, A Woman in Paris, his first dramatic film, which failed to get any attention. Chaplin told his kids, "He's the madman, I'm the comic," but it could have been the other way around.
Seine Blitzer, Ulten, Blüter, der Inge, schön Stress, Ilsen, sagt der Blüten, sagt der Eng, Blüten, sagt der Berlin, schon Strütz mit einer, Blüten, sagt der Ü.
In 1931, on his soul-searching trip to Western Europe, Chaplin visited Berlin and was mobbed by German fans. This apparently enraged the Nazis who came to power in 1933. Nazi party members wrote the book The Jews Are Looking at You in 1934, where they described Charlie, apparently they were still angry 3 years later, as a disgusting Jewish acrobat. This despite the fact that Charlie Chaplin was not Jewish, he was a Christian from England. During this time, Chaplin also viewed Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will, which is where he learned to do Hitler's speech mannerisms for the movie. He watched it with the French director René Clair, who was so horrified by the film that he screamed out that it should never be seen. However, Chaplin's reaction was loud laughter.
That's
His Excellency has just referred to the Jewish people.
Chaplin plays the Fooey, Adenoid Hinkle, as well as the Jewish barber who looks like the Fooey. He'd write the story between 1938 and 1939, as Germany underwent Kristallnacht, grabbed the Sudetenland, invaded Austria, and just 6 days before filming started, Germany invaded Poland and Britain declared war on the Nazis. Still, the film upset both German and British diplomats in America, which was staying out of the war for now. Chaplin is willing to mercilessly parry Hitler and Mussolini here as loud, petulant, childish figures, ridiculous in manner and dress. After giving a Triumph of the Will-inspired speech performance made up of vaguely German-sounding gibberish, Adenoid Hinkle gets in the car with his interior minister, Herr Garbage, and quietly asks, "How was the speech?" To which Garbage says, "You should have gone after the Jews more violently." In The Great Dictator, scenes of goose-stepping and pogroms are shown to be mere distractions to cover up for how bad things actually are in Tomania. In another part, the attacks against the Jews stop entirely, as Adenoid Hinkle hopes to get a loan from Hermann Epstein. The loan will be used to invade Austerlitz. The inherent understanding of the dictator, transcending Hitler and Mussolini in this moment, has made this film not just a time capsule, but remarkably fresh. Hinkle and Napoleoni, frenemies to say the least, spend their time trying to flex on each other in ways that are still familiar in autocratic societies today. We also get the lives of Tomanian Jews, including the Jewish barber who lost his memory trying to save one of Hinkle's future commanders in World War I, and the woman he falls in love with, Hannah, played by Paulette Goddard. Towards the end, the Jewish barber gets sent to a concentration camp, A thing, it should be said, was not yet known to be an extermination camp. Later, Chaplin wrote that he would not have made the film as a comedy if he had known the horrors of the Holocaust. In 1940, when The Great Dictator was premiered in New York City, the one part audiences didn't love was the speech at the end when Chaplin looks right into the camera. However, in 1941, as the U.S. entered the war after Pearl Harbor, FDR, who liked the film, as did Churchill, invited Charlie Chaplin to give his final speech on the radio to the American people.
The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people.